The LA Kings are battling for playoff position. Eddie Garcia of Locked On LA Kings joins us to discuss what it'll take to get a good playoff position and to have success once they get there. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On LA Kings, Eddie Garcia. And Eddie, the Kings are in the thick of a fight for playoff positioning right now. They seem to be playing better as of late. What has been the difference during this recent winning streak?
Well, I think the easy answer is probably health. They got Victor Arvidsson back not long ago, who missed most of the season because of back surgery, a second back surgery that he's had since joining the Kings. And he just brings a different element. He was kind of their trade deadline pickup because they did literally nothing at the deadline, but they knew he was coming back. They knew what he meant to the lineup. Makes them a deeper team, a more dangerous team. He's a guy who's just very active in the middle of everything. So him coming back has certainly helped out. It's helped out their number one power play unit as well. Had kind of a trickle-down effect as well. But really just getting healthy at the right time. Philip Deneau had been out for 4 games. He came back in the game against Vancouver Saturday night, and the Kings looked great. So I think the key for the Kings right now is just stay healthy. They've got a very favorable schedule down the stretch. They should be able to put some wins together going into the playoffs, and hopefully that'll be enough to get them to make some noise.
Big win over the Vancouver Canucks the other day. How does that affect this team's confidence heading down the stretch?
Well, as you mentioned, the playoff positioning is up for grabs. There's a couple of scenarios in which they could face Vancouver, which I think that they would very much like to do in the first round. One of them would be for Edmonton to catch Vancouver and win the Pacific. They're 3 points back going into the action on Monday. And the Kings, if they finish in the second wild card, if they, Nashville's battling with them for the wild card spot, and Vancouver does hold on in the Pacific, then there's a chance that would be actually I'm going to be backtrack that if they have the number one wildcard spot, if they've passed Nashville, they passed Nashville this weekend. If they can hold on to that spot and Vancouver wins the Pacific, then they would face Vancouver as well. So it's been a favorable matchup for the Kings. We saw it on Saturday. For whatever reason, they play very well against the Canucks. 3-0-1 against the top team in the Pacific and the top team in the West for most of the season. So they just match up very favorably against Vancouver. So if they could pick their first round matchup, that would definitely be the one. The other potential matchups, Edmonton, they not so great against the Oilers, and they've beaten us in the first round the last 2 years, 1-2-1 this year against Edmonton, lost the last meeting. And then Dallas, they've really not matched up well against the Stars. They're 0-3 against Dallas this year, and I think they've been outscored something like 16-3. So the matchups, there's some positives and negatives, but and I know you can't really go into it wanting to pick who you're going to play as a player, and as a team, you just go out and you win the games, and whatever happens. But if they could face the Canucks in the first round, I think a lot of Kings fans would be very happy about that.
Talk to me about the state of the goaltending as we head into the final 5 games of the season.
It's been very interesting. Cam Talbot was amazing to start the year, was named an NHL All-Star, and then around the time the team slumped, he went into a big tailspin. And whether the two things were just completely connected or not, I would assume they are. But he has since, after the All-Star break, bounced back strong, has been very good. I believe he's around 5th in the NHL in goals against and save percentage on the season. So even though he started off like a rocket ship, he came crashing down to earth, and now he's ascending again. So it's been an interesting season for him, and I guess for the Kings as well. Certainly, everyone's hoping in Los Angeles that the Kings are in an ascent again, because when they've shown that they are playing at their best, they've been one of the better teams in the NHL. The problem is obviously consistency. They lost 3 games in a row on a Western Canadian road trip, and then they come back home and now they've won 3 games in a row. So it's been the up and down, both long term and sometimes short term. But again, when the Kings are on an upswing, they've shown they can be dangerous.
This team has a balanced offense. It's not like they rely on one player to score 50 goals and everybody else has 20. Who are some of the key players that need to shine down the stretch and in the playoffs for the Kings to have success?
Well, Trevor Moore just scored his 30th goal of the season against Vancouver. That's a career high and then some. He's had a breakout year. It looked at one point in the season he might approach 40. He cooled off a little bit as well. It's kind of the story with the Kings this year. They've had their high moments and they've had their low moments, and he's been an example of that as well. But he got number 30. Adrian Kempe is very hot right now. I believe it's 27 or 28 goals right now. He's approaching 30. Kevin Fiala is a very dangerous scorer. Mentioned Victor Arvidsson back in. Now, obviously, he hasn't played most of the year, but he's been a guy who has shown, 30 goal potential type of a player. Andre Kopitar, steady, doing it all. And I think one X factor for the Kings would probably be Quentin Byfield. He's had a breakout year as well. He's been a bit cold, though, lately as far as putting up the numbers. Been in a drought. He's been stuck on 19 for several weeks now. It'd be nice to see him get number 20, kind of get that off his back going into the playoffs. But no, there's some definitely some pretty balanced scoring for the Kings. And you're talking about all the guys I mentioned. They're all, now with Arvidsson back, they all can spread them out over the top 3 lines and have 3 really strong lines with a sniper, if you will, on each one of those lines.
Right. How important is veteran leadership for this team? You've got guys like Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty who have won Stanley Cups with this organization, who have been through the wars. How important are they, especially come playoff time?
I think they're extremely important. Those 2 guys have a lot of mileage on them, but they're still playing at a high level. Kopitar, I think as important as a lot of other players are on the team, he's the most important. When he's going well, the team goes well. They really follow his lead. Now, they can win without him scoring necessarily, but like when they're really on their game, he's in the middle of it. And Drew Doughty almost played 29 minutes the other night. He's still carrying the load. I'm sure they maybe down the stretch here, as they've got some favorable games, maybe they ease back a bit and get him a little bit of rest going into the postseason. But no, he still leads the defense. So the 2 most tenured players on the team, the 2 guys who are still around from the Stanley Cup years, are still as important to this team as anybody on this team. So it's not as if their roles haven't diminished in any way. Doughty's still on the top pairing. He's on the top power play, and Kopitar is the center in the top line, and he's on the number 1 power play unit. So those guys have been through it, but their roles are still as big as they've ever been.
All right, so finish this sentence for me. The LA Kings go on a long playoff run if?
I would say if they get the power play going. I think they're good enough 5-on-5. I think they're definitely good enough defensively. And to the surprise of some, I think they're good enough in net. The special teams, though, their power play has to give them something. It's been pretty inconsistent. It was a strength last year. It hasn't been the case this year. They emphasized the penalty kill going into this season because that was bad last year. It's been amongst the best in the league. So they've made the correction there, but they took a slide back on the power play. So if the power play can get going, and Victor Arvidsson does really help out with that, if they can get some production on the power play, I think that this team can do some damage.
All right, Eddie, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Obviously the podcast, wherever you find your podcast, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, all that. Also on YouTube, just search LA Kings. If you just search Kings, you might get a basketball team that plays in Northern California. So make sure you include the LA Kings, and on social media at LA Kings, at Locked On LA Kings.
All right, Eddie, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They have superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.